Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking a plunge into the fascinating realm of binary star systems. You know, those cosmic pairings where two or more stars are gravitationally linked.
Right, dancing around a shared center. And they're actually really common, formed in those big swirling clouds of gas.
Exactly. And usually you might picture them pretty close together, right? Locked in a tight gravitational hug.
hmm But today, we're looking at something a bit different, maybe even a bit mind-bending. Ultra-wide binaries.
Ultra wide. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, we're talking stellar pairs separated by truly immense distances. Think over 30,000 astronomical units.
30,000 AU, that's huge. How far is that in, like light years?
It's roughly half a parsec, or about 1.6 light years apart.
Wow. So stars 1.6 light years apart, but still connected. That almost feels wrong.
It does seem counterintuitive. How can they possibly stay gravitationally bound when they're that far apart?
Yeah, how do they even hold together? And I guess that makes them hard to find, right?
Oh, incredibly hard. Their orbital motion is just achingly slow.
Mm,
And on the sky, they might look a degree or more apart.
a whole degree. That's way more than the moon. Not like close binaries where you can clearly see their neighbors.
Exactly. So for ages, spotting these was a real challenge. You couldn't easily track their orbits or measure velocities like you do for closer pairs. The timescales are just too vast.
Then came Gaia. I hear that mission changed everything.
Completely changed the game. Gaia is this space observatory giving us incredibly precise measurements.
Of what specifically?
Star positions, their distances, the parallaxes, which are crucial, and how they're moving across the sky, their proper motions. Super accurate stuff.
Okay, like giving us cosmic GPS for stars.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And because of that precision, we're suddenly finding thousands upon thousands of these ultra-wide systems like we've put on superpowered glasses.
Thousands. So what can we learn from finding so many?
Oh, a ton. We can look at, how many there are, what kinds of stars make up these pairs. That gives us clues about star formation, how stars evolve. We can check their chemistry, look at their orbits, even use them to probe our galaxy, maybe look for things like machos.
Machos, right, the dark matter candidates. We'll get to that.
Yep. And there are even links to other cool stuff like planetary nebulae and stars with exoplanets. So yeah, Gaia's data lets us explore all these connections.
All right, let's dig in. First off, just the sheer number you mentioned. Over 50,000 wide binaries cataloged.
That's right, from Gaia's second data release, DR2, El Badri and Rix put together this huge catalog in 2018.
And wide here means what range again?
They looked at separations from 50 AU, which is, roughly out to the Kuiper belt in our solar system, all the way up to that 50,000 AU mark.
And these are all relatively nearby.
Yep, all within about 200 parsecs, so in our local neighborhood, astronomically speaking, but still 50,000 pairs. It's a testament to Gaia's power.
Incredible numbers. And what kinds of stars are in these pairs? Just sun-like stars.
Mostly, yes. The bulk of them, over 50,000, are main sequence stars. Stars doing their main job, fusing hydrogen, often around 3 billion years old on average in this sample.
Oh.
But interestingly, they also found over 3,000 systems with a main sequence star paired with a white dwarf.
Ah, the end state for stars like the sun, the dense remnant.
Exactly. And even cooler, nearly 400 pairs where both stars are white dwarfs.
Two white dwarfs orbiting each other, that widely separated. Wow.
Yeah, so quite a mix. And these different types, they seem to behave a bit differently in terms of how far apart they typically are.
Oh, how so? Do the white dwarf pairs tend to be closer or farther?
Well, when you look at the distribution of separations, you see something interesting. The main sequence pairs are spread out fairly evenly from, say, 500 to 50,000 AU.
Okay, well, wide range.
But the pairs involving white dwarfs, either one or two of them, show these distinct breaks. The main sequence white dwarf pairs seem to cut off around 3,000 AU.
So you don't find many wider than that.
Fewer, yeah. And for the white dwarf pairs, that break happens even closer, around 1,500 AU. It's like there's a maximum separation preferred by these remnant systems.
That is a weird pattern. Why would that happen? Is it something about white dwarfs themselves?
The leading idea involves something called a kick during the white dwarf's formation.
A kick, like it gets pushed.
Sort of. When a star puffs off its outer layers to become a white dwarf, that mass loss isn't always perfectly symmetrical.
Ah, okay.
It's uneven. It can give the brand new white dwarf a little velocity nudge, a kick, maybe around 0.75 kilometers per second.
Which doesn't sound like much, cosmically speaking.
It's not huge, but in these very weakly bound wide systems, it could be enough to break the pair apart entirely if they were wider than that 1,500 or 3,000 AU limit. or at least change their separation.
Like trying to stay linked by a weak thread, and one partner gets a sudden shove.
Exactly that. It disrupts the widest, most fragile connections. It's a neat explanation for those observed breaks in the separation data.
Okay, that makes sense. A little stellar shove reshaping the binary population. Now, another angle confirming these wide pairs are really pairs. You mentioned chemistry.
Right. The basic idea is stars born together from the same original cloud of gas and dust should have basically the same chemical recipe.
Same ingredients. Makes sense.
So even if they're now separated by, tens of thousands of AU, if they truly form together, their chemistry should match.
So, did someone check this with Gaia targets?
Yep. Hawkins and colleagues did this in 2020. They took high-resolution spectra, basically detailed light measurements telling you about the elements for 25 wide binary systems found by Gaia.
And these were pairs of similar stars.
Yeah, main sequence stars of similar spectral types, meaning similar temperatures and general characteristics.
Did they match? Were they chemical twins?
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Yeah.
About 80% of the pairs they looked at were chemically homogeneous,
Homogeneous meaning?
meaning they had essentially the same amount of iron relative to hydrogen. That's the FeH value astronomers use a lot, and also similar amounts of other elements they measured.
Wow, 80%. That's pretty strong evidence they really are related, even across those huge distances.
It really is. It's another powerful confirmation, independent of just their shared motion through space, that these aren't just chance alignments. They share a birthplace.
Like a cosmic DNA test confirming their siblings. Very cool. Okay, so we know they exist, what they're made of, and that they share chemistry. What about their history? Can their orbits tell us anything? Like a fossil record.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Their current orbits, specifically things like how elongated or circular they are, their eccentricity, hold clues about how they formed and what gravitational encounters they might have had early on.
But their orbits must take millions, maybe billions of years, right? We can't just watch them go around.
We definitely can't watch a full orbit. But from Gaia's snapshot of their positions and velocities now, we can statistically infer properties like eccentricity for large populations.
Ah, okay, so looking at the statistics for thousands of them.
Precisely. Tokavinen did this in 2020, analyzing those 50,000 wide binaries from the El-Badri and Rix catalog using the Gaia DR2 data.
And what did the overall picture of their orbits look like? Did it match expectations?
Generally, yes. The overall distribution of eccentricity seemed pretty consistent with what you'd expect from stars forming in clusters and having dynamical interactions, gravitational jostling early in their lives.
Like bumps and nudges in the stellar nursery?
Pretty much. But he also found some interesting details depending on how far apart they are now.
Oh, like what?
Pairs that are relatively closer, say projected separations under 200 AU, tend to have more circular orbits.
More circular. Why would that be?
That's likely because of things like tidal forces between the stars or maybe friction from leftover gas in the very early days. These effects tend to circularize orbits over time, especially for closer pairs.
Okay, smoothing things out. What about the really wide ones?
The wider pairs, those beyond about 1,000 AU, showed an excess of highly eccentric orbits, very stretched out paths.
More than expected. Why?
One strong possibility is that these might be remnants of unstable triple systems. Imagine 3 stars forming together, things get chaotic, and one star gets ejected violently.
Ah, the system kicks one out.
Right. And the remaining 2 stars are often left in a wider, much more eccentric orbit than they might have started with. It's like a signature of a past ejection event.
A cosmic breakup leaving its mark. Fascinating. Okay, so orbits tell us about past dynamics. What about the places they formed? Do wide binaries prefer certain kinds of stellar nurseries?
That's another key question Gaia helps address. Deacon and Krauss looked into this in 2020, comparing wide binary populations in different environments.
Like comparing dense clusters versus stars just floating in the galaxy?
Exactly. They compared well-known open clusters, places like the Pleiades, Hyades, Praesepe, with the general field population, the stars that have dispersed from their birthplaces.
And what was the difference?
A really significant one, those relatively dense open clusters, they have a much lower fraction of wide binaries compared to the field.
Lower. That seems odd. Wouldn't you expect more pairs in a crowded place?
You might think so, but those crowded places are also dynamically rougher. Wide binaries are very weakly bound by gravity.
Right.
In a dense cluster, there are lots of other stars passing close by, and their gravitational tugs can easily disrupt these fragile wide pairs, pulling them apart over time.
So they just don't survive the rough and tumble environment.
That seems to be the case. The tighter binaries survive, but the wide ones get broken up more easily in those dense clusters.
Okay. But what about less dense regions?
Interestingly, when they looked at younger groups that probably came from looser associations, things called young moving groups or the Pisces Eridanus stream, the fraction of wide binaries was similar to the field, or maybe even a bit higher.
Suggesting that forming in a less crowded place gives wide binaries a better chance of surviving long term.
Exactly. The initial birth environment seems crucial for whether these wide systems last. Gentler nurseries are kinder to wider pairs.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's shift gears to something really intriguing using these binaries to probe the galaxy, especially for machos. Massive, compact halo objects. That idea has been around a while, right?
It has. The basic logic is, if our galaxy's halo is full of these unseen massive objects, machos, potential dark matter candidates, their gravity should mess with things.
Like disrupt these very wide, weakly bound binaries.
Precisely. If a macho passes close enough to an ultra-wide binary, its gravity could easily be enough to break the pair apart. So if machos are common, we might expect to see fewer really wide binaries surviving, especially those that spend a lot of time in the halo.
Okay, so you look at how many wide binaries there are at different distances and in different parts of the galaxy.
Kind of. Tien and colleagues did this in 2020 using Gaia DR2. They created samples of ultra-wide binaries out to a parsec separation, really huge, in our local neighborhood.
A parsec, that's over 3 light years.
Yep. And crucially, they split these binaries into groups based on their velocities, some moving like typical disk stars, some with faster, more random halo-like motions, and some in between.
So they could see if binaries spending more time in the halo were affected differently.
That was the idea. They looked at how the number of binaries changed with separation for these different groups.
Did they find fewer wide binaries in the halo group, like machos would predict?
Actually, no. They found the slope of the separation distribution, basically how quickly the number drops off as you go to wider separations, between 300 and 10,000 AU was the same for all groups. Disk, intermediate, and halo.
The same. That doesn't sound like machos are disrupting the halo ones more.
It doesn't. They did see the distribution getting steeper at very large separations, beyond 10,000 AU, and this steepening seemed worse for older populations.
But they argued this wasn't caused by machos.
Correct. They argued the patterns didn't match what you'd expect from disruptions by machos or by passing stars or giant molecular clouds either. Those effects should hit disk binaries harder, for instance, which wasn't what they saw.
So if it's not machos or other disruptors, what did they think causes the pattern, especially the steep drop-off at the widest separations?
Their favorite explanation goes back to formation. They suggest the distribution is mainly set by how these binaries form within star clusters that then dissolve,
Ah, okay.
and that steepening at really wide separations. They think that just reflects the finite size of the birth clusters themselves. Stars simply didn't form much farther apart than that within the original cluster before it dispersed.
So the edge of the distribution is just the edge of the nursery they grew up in, more or less.
That's the idea. It seems to fit the data better than invoking a specific population of machos causing disruptions.
Interesting. So this study, using Gaia's amazing data on wide binaries, seems to put another constraint on machos, suggesting they aren't the main explanation for dark matter, at least not in a form that disrupts these binaries.
It's a fair interpretation of their results, yeah. It adds to the evidence pointing away from machos as a dominant dark matter component.
Okay, beyond dark matter. I also read these systems could test gravity itself on huge scales. That sounds wild.
It does, but it's a serious area of research. Because the stars in these ultra-wide binaries, say beyond 5,000 AU, are so far apart, the gravitational pull between them is incredibly weak.
Weaker than usual.
Much weaker than in tighter systems or even our solar system. This makes them unique natural laboratories to test if gravity behaves exactly as Einstein's general relativity predicts in this ultra-low acceleration regime.
And compare it to alternatives, like MOND.
Exactly. MOD-modified Newtonian dynamics proposes that gravity might behave differently at very low accelerations, potentially explaining galaxy rotation without needing dark matter. Wide binaries offer a place to test that.
Has Gaia data shown anything definitive there? Any cracks in Einstein's theory?
Well, some studies looking at the statistical properties of wide binaries from Gaia have reported some anomalies, things that look a bit odd compared to standard gravity predictions.
Really?
But there's a big caveat. It's also very possible these anomalies aren't due to new physics, but are caused by hidden third stars in the systems.
Ah, undetected triple systems messing up the calculations.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be you're looking at a pure binary when they're so far apart and moving so slowly. So it's an active area. But No smoking gun against general relativity from white binaries yet, as far as our sources indicate.
Right, complexity upon complexity. Okay, let's connect these wide binaries to something else, planetary nebulae, those amazing structures from dying stars.
Yeah, there's a strong link there. It's now pretty well accepted that binary interactions are often crucial for shaping planetary nebulae.
Shaping them how?
Many planetary nebulae aren't spherical. They have beautiful, complex shapes, often bipolar, like two lobes shooting out. A close binary companion can really influence how the dying star sheds its outer layers, creating these non-spherical forms.
So maybe wide companions play a role too.
That's what Gonzalez Santamaria and colleagues investigated in 2020. They used Gaia DR2's precise data to hunt for wide companions out to maybe 20,000 AU, around 211 known planetary nebulae.
Did they find many?
They found convincing wide binary companions for 8 of them.
8 out of 211.
Right. And all of those companions were within 15,000 AU.
So it confirms wide binarity happens for stars that make planetary nebulae, but maybe not super commonly, or maybe the really wide ones aren't relevant.
It suggests it plays a role, yeah.
Yeah.
But they also noted that Gaia's next data release, DR3, would be needed to do a more complete search, especially for finding companions that might be a bit closer or fainter. The picture is still developing.
Okay, still more pieces to the puzzle coming. And finally, let's touch on exoplanets, specifically those weird hot Jupiters.
Yes, the giant planets scorching right next to their stars. There's been this ongoing debate. Are stars with hot Jupiters more likely to have a wide binary companion star?
Why would they be? What's the theory?
Well, some ideas suggest a distant stellar companion could gravitationally perturb the system over long timescales, maybe kicking the giant planet inwards towards the star, or perhaps influencing the disk where the planet formed in the first place.
Right, a third body stirring things up. Has Gaia helped check this?
It has. Huang and colleagues, also in 2020, used Gaia DR2 to specifically look for very wide companions between 1,000 and 10,000 AU around stars known to host hot Jupiters.
And are hot Jupiter hosts frequently in these super wide pairs?
Their initial results suggest probably not. They found only about 10% of the hot Jupiter hosts they looked at had companions in that wide separation range.
Only 10%. That doesn't sound like a strong connection.
No, it doesn't. So their tentative conclusion was that the formation or migration of hot Jupiters probably isn't strongly driven by this kind of very wide binarity.
Though maybe closer companions could still matter.
Exactly. This study focused on the 1,000 to 10,000 AU range. Again, they noted that future, more precise Gaia data will help clarify the picture further.
It really feels like Gaia is this thread connecting so many different areas of astrophysics through these wide binaries.
It absolutely is. It's given us this unprecedented ability to find and study these systems in huge numbers, opening up all these avenues of research.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's just amazing to think about how much Gaia has revealed about these ultra-wide binaries. We started with this puzzle, how can stars be so far apart yet connected?
They seemed almost impossibly fragile.
And now, thanks to Gaia's precision, we've seen how common they actually are, the different types, the chemical proof of their shared births.
How their orbits tell stories about their pasts, how these survive or don't survive in different environments.
And even using them as tools, probing the galaxy, testing gravity, maybe ruling out some dark matter ideas. It's incredible.
The takeaways are really powerful. The diversity, the chemical links, the orbital fossils, the environmental clues, and the constraints they place on galactic structure and even fundamental physics. It shows a precision astronomy can do.
It really makes you contemplate the scales, doesn't it? Two stars, born together, drifting maybe light years apart, but still linked by gravity for billions of years. It's such a unique view of cosmic dynamics.
Absolutely. And it leaves you wondering, what other secrets are still hiding in that Gaia data, waiting for us to find?
A perfect thought to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.